to anyone who's not on camera, if you can join us on camera, that'd be fabulous. If you don't want to, no problem. If you're not prepared, if we've thrown it on you that there's participation, no problem. We will be running today's session as more of a discussion with Jacqui, and then as we get towards the end, we'll do Q&A, so you can join us then if you're willing to. So we're a few minutes past the hour. I think people are still steadily joining, but I'm just going to start us off with an introduction. So hi everyone, I'm Georgina Gorman, if we haven't met before. Welcome to FeForte. If you don't know anything about FeForte so far, our mission is to build female resilience using science and philosophy. One of the key ways that we do this is to share knowledge, and today's conversation is exactly that. So just a quick flag, we will be recording today's session. So if you're on the line and you're staying on with us, we hope you're okay with that, with your name and your camera. So just to flag, if you don't want to come off the line and you don't want to say anything, then just please feel free to chat in any of your questions, and we'll go through and I'll call those out. And we will be holding Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to come off mute then. If you're happy to stay on mute and just chat in any questions as you go through, that will be fabulous. We may stop the recording for the end of the questions in case anyone's a little bit shy and doesn't want the question recorded. We hold these types of conversations regularly, either as recorded sessions or live events, and cover many different topics. You'll hear personal stories of challenge and resilience, hear from women in specific roles or industries who are sharing their advice and wisdom, and you'll also hear from some experts and scientists about the ways that we can build resilience and flourish. So make sure to sign up to our mailing list or follow us on social media to be the first to know about upcoming events. You probably already have done if you're on with us live. That's probably how you found out about us. But to anyone listening to the recording, make sure to do that. So our other key principles to build resilience are to create community and to change habits. And to create community, we've established a group where women of all backgrounds and experiences can come together, where members can network, support and mentor each other. And we build resilience through changing habits, and you'll learn the key habits for resilience on any of our training courses. So either check out our website or get in touch with us to learn more about any of those things. So without further delay, welcome to today's conversation with the wonderful Jacqui Larsson. Jacqui is an award-winning independent jeweller and board member of the London Diamond Bourse. Her business has been active for over 15 years in London and Amsterdam. Amazingly, she was shortlisted as a Best Business Women Award 2020 finalist, and in January was named as one of the UK's most 100 inspirational female entrepreneurs by Small Business Britain's F Entrepreneur #IAlso campaign. I'm very glad I got that out because I was
such a mouthful. I know.
Today she's going to share with us how she's found resilience through her life and career, and some lessons that she's learned along the way. So thank you so much, Jacqui, for taking the time to join us, and I'll hand over to you to tell us your story.
Thank you, Georgina. It's a privilege actually to be invited, because I think what you're doing is really quite visionary. There's a couple of familiar faces out there already, so it's lovely to see. For those who haven't come across me before, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm not British born and bred. I was born in Australia, and my father was an army officer, which basically meant that every year or two we were moving. And so as a young child growing up, constantly being the new girl at school, finding the sort of tribe that you wanted to hang out with, settling, finding your friends and so on, and then it was time to leave. So it's quite unsettling. When I was in my early teens, my father then moved into private enterprise, and so I then had some continuity with the last 4 years of secondary school. And I went on to university, where I did an economics degree, and then moved into professional work, where I trained as a chartered accountant. So I worked for a large professional services firm and had some work in Hong Kong, and that eventually also brought me to London. So after 3 years of working in audit, specializing in venture capital and banking, I had my first work in industry for a very large Japanese brokerage house. And it was quite a transition, because the caliber of staff were very different. I'd gone from working in an environment where people were highly educated, very ambitious, very driven, to a firm where people actually were cut from a very different cloth. So they needed to be motivated in different ways, which was fine. That I could deal with. But the chap who I directly reported to was a very unpleasant, difficult man who had a massive chip on his shoulder. And the longer I was there for, the more I learned that actually that chip was all directed towards women, professional women, and in particular, educated professional women. He had sort of come to work in a roundabout way where he'd left school at 16. And I think he really he felt that anybody that had had a tertiary education had an easy life. And he was a real bully. And it eventually started to really have an impact on my mental well-being. And if any of you are familiar with a sort of accounting reporting cycle, it's very much driven around this month-end reporting process. And so for 2 weeks, about 1 a.m., which meant getting home sometime before 2, which of course is physically and emotionally draining. And what compounded all of this was the ethos of the place, where it was incredibly unbalanced. There was no emphasis on well-being and pragmatism. So despite the fact that I might have only got to bed at 2 a.m., if I turned up to work a minute past 9 the following day, there would be eyebrows raised. And this was by people who'd left at 6 o'clock the night before, I might add. So it was a really incongruent sort of working environment. What I think made it particularly difficult was that you knew that there was no one in charge that had any vision. There was no sign that this was ever going to change. It was this constant roller coaster. And when I look back on it, you think, why on earth did I stick it out? Mm-hmm. And I think you need to put this in perspective, that when you have a mortgage and financial obligations and all these other things going on, and you're busy working, you don't have time to check out the job market and interview at other places and so on. You're so busy just trying to keep everything together. However, things sort of reached a point where one evening, I thought I was going to be able to leave at a rather respectable 7 p.m. And as I collected my things and headed towards the door, and this I will never forget, he waited till I was just about to walk through it. And then he called out, "Where do you think you're going? I haven't finished with you yet." Wow. And it was a very sort of deliberate and public humiliation in front of the whole department staff. And I was a senior head of department. It was not just rude, it was rude and inappropriate. And so I sort of had to turn around, walk back, and my desk was positioned right next to his. And for the next 20 minutes, he spoke to a very junior member of staff about football while I sat there stewing. And he was rubbing my nose in it. Mm. And so I basically said to him, "Are you going to give me something to do? Because if you're not, I'm out of here." And he sort of turned and looked at me, and he was really odd. He never used to blink either. It was quite disconcerting. And so he eventually sort of dismissed this other junior colleague, and then he started writing a very long list, which he then presented me with and said, "You need to do this before you go tonight." And so my response was, well, if this was so important, you would have known this at 9 o'clock this morning, certainly by lunchtime, and absolutely by 3 o'clock. Why are you presenting this to me at 7:30 tonight? I'm not doing it. This is a reflection of you being disorganized, not me. And whilst I'm communicating this in a measured way now, it doesn't really reflect the tension that had escalated, and I was really upset.
Mm.
And I ended up leaving to go to the ladies to sort of recompose myself. And what was really interesting was the constant stream of women who then came in to comfort me and tell me about their own stories and experiences with this bloke.
Mm.
It was by no means isolated or unusual. And lots of senior women had left because of him. So I went back, collected my stuff with my eyes all sort of swollen and bleary-eyed, and I left for the evening. And the following night was almost like a diluted second version of things, where I worked till about 10:15. And it's amazing how I can remember all these little details.
Mm.
And was getting ready to leave, and he did the same thing. But it was interesting, he didn't have the same sense of conviction when he was saying, you have to stay and finish. And I said, no, are you joking? It's 10:15 at night. I've put in a solid day's work. I'm going home. And at that point, you could feel the change in balance of power, because he knew he was never going to be able to force me to stay and work again. I mean, I have a very strong work ethic. I don't need to have somebody behave like that. So whilst the department was subsequently completely restructured, and he was actually put out on a limb, he no longer had any staff reporting to him. I think that I think the company, obviously there was some recognition that they hadn't taken the right steps, and this was their quiet way of dealing with it. Everyone in that department knew about this showdown. Nobody asked me about it or asked what perhaps we could do to make things better, but there was change. But I think ultimately having these elevated cortisol levels and sort of stress for an extended period of time had taken its toll on my health, and I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease about 6 months later, which I wholly attribute to this experience of working with this man. And to their credit, the company were incredibly supportive of me during my treatment and reintegrating me back into the workplace when I'd recovered. And I had my 2 children while I was working for them. And after having had my second son, I didn't feel comfortable with the work-life balance, and I chose to take a career break and become a full-time mother. And as any of you out there who've got kids will know, it's busy, but it's not necessarily intellectually challenging. And for me, I need to have something that keeps me engaged. And as Julia, who's in on this call, probably knows, somebody who lives and breathes gemstones and jewelry, it was always part of my DNA, but I'd had no idea that you could become credentialed in this area. And that was revelatory to me. And so I'd done some research, and I discovered that I could learn in a very flexible way. At that stage, I could do it part-time. I could do it by correspondence. And so I started studying at nights and on weekends, and it was an epiphany. It was like, this is what I should always have been doing. I was really good at it. It came to me very, very naturally. And it reminded me when I was at university of the mature age students who were always super organized, really diligent, really focused, whereas the rest of us were often hungover, disorganized. You know, our emphasis was sort of, yeah, let's get the work done, but let's have fun and so on. And actually, I had reached that stage in my life where I really understood why they had their act together. Because when you have these other obligations in your life and you have to prioritize, you are much more driven and efficient. You know, you don't have the same sort of time to waste. Every second counts. And around this time, I also secured an internship at the Diamond Trading Company, which at that stage was the sales and marketing arm of De Beers. And that was life-changing for me. You know, there are other members at the bourse who might be second, third, fourth generation diamantaire, and they will never have stepped foot inside De Beers. It is such a secretive, sort of opaque organization. And they were so generous with what they shared with us. We were sorting rough and polished diamonds. We went into the sorting room. We were there during their sort of selling process, which is referred to as a site. We could do anything, ask anything. We spoke to people from Botswana and Namibia who could tell us about all the sort of positive things that natural diamonds were having on the sort of infrastructure. You know, a generation of Botswanans have been educated on the back of the natural diamond industry. And that sort of continues to inform me to this day. And so when I sat my diamond exams, I submitted papers with the highest marks in the world, and in recognition of that was awarded the Deeks Diamond Prize from the Gemological Association of Great Britain, which was incredibly rewarding after sort of juggling all these balls. And I hadn't done it with any vocational intent at all. It was indulging a fascination and a curiosity about something which I was really invested in. But not surprisingly, friends and family started to approach me saying, you know all this stuff, can you source me this, can you make me that? And I'm not a goldsmith, and I was not going to start from scratch working on the bench either. There are sort of things I'm willing to sort of commit to, but that was a step too far. So what I did have to do was really start to develop relationships with people in that supply chain who had a shared vision, a shared set of values, a shared ethos, because you are the company you keep. And I think for me, starting off in an industry where, you know, I was really quite new to it, making sure that I was, that the quality of the people that were going to be part of my organization were high was really important. The downside was, just as I was starting to get some traction with all of this, we moved to Amsterdam with my husband's work. And it was, yet again, it felt like this, just as I'm starting to make progress and following a different path, having to start from scratch again. But I'm a big believer in the saying that when a door opens, a window, when a door closes, a window opens. And these things happen in very unexpected ways, which I guess is the joy of the uncertain future. And so I started from scratch. I registered with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, and I started researching producers and suppliers in both the Netherlands and, more importantly for me, actually, in Belgium. So Antwerp has several diamond bourses and some fantastic producers. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I was actually networking with my ideal audience. The expats are quite affluent, they're adventurous, they're curious, they're well educated, and most importantly, they're not desperate for brand validation. They would rather define themselves by having something which other people don't have, something unique, something personal, something which really speaks of them. And that is my ideal audience. And business flourished. It was a fantastically productive and creative period. I also came into contact with some stone suppliers who just produce the most spectacular array of stones for the high jewelry houses of the world, and they do not market. Unless you make a point of finding them, they won't come on your radar, and that was a gift. Had I stayed in the UK, I would never have come across them. And when we returned to the UK, it was like starting from scratch yet again. I didn't have any client base, and I wanted to take a sabbatical. My children were at sort of important stages of their lives with schooling and so on. And so I took a break for a couple of years. And when I was ready to relaunch, it was a spectacular non-event. I just could not get any traction or momentum at all. And I think it became evident that I had been living in this bubble in Amsterdam, whilst everything in the UK and the retail landscape was changing radically. And I mean everything. So how consumers shopped, where they shopped, how they researched, how much they were willing to spend online, who they trusted, the whole role of sort of influencers and so on, the way people marketed, and social media, of course, started to be just obligatory. And I didn't use it personally. So actually, obviously, I didn't really have professional accounts either. And so my business was not reflecting those seismic changes, nor was it communicating what was special about my business. And so I went through a period of enormous self-doubt and really questioned whether there was any point in continuing. I sort of felt as if I was really out of step with things. And discussions with some other, I met with a business coach, and just sort of discussions with various other people in the business community sort of made me realize that actually, if I was going to go forward, I had to rebrand. You know, I was the business, and I'd always avoided putting my name up in lights for a number of reasons, not least of all security. And so towards the end of 2018, I went back to the drawing board and started from scratch, and we redid everything. We changed the business name, we redid graphics, we redid logos, I built an e-commerce site. It was an exhaustive top to toe sort of forensic look, and built it from scratch. And it is ultimately a rewarding process if you do it well, because you have to understand who your client is, where they hang out, what their interests are, what their pain points are, and how you're going to solve them for them. And my, well, it's actually quite coincidental, but all the key people that helped me with this were women. And that wasn't by design, it was because they were the best people for the job. They understood me, they understood my product, they understood my business, they understood my client. And actually, one of the people that really helped change my business was Sylvia, who's on this call as well, who's an SEO specialist. And whilst I'd had this wonderful website, if no one hears about it, it's pointless. And Sylvia has been an outstanding support as well, with sort of me starting to reposition myself. And it's been a massive learning curve. It's exhausting, you know, and it never stops. You have to be eternally curious with all of this, because no sooner do you think you sort of figure out how something works than the goalposts change again. And then I networked like crazy to raise personal and brand awareness. And things were really starting to move nicely until we all know what happened in March of last year. Mm. And jewelry is inherently personal. Mm. So to be denied personal contact, business just sort of fell off a cliff in March, April of last year. But funnily enough, I didn't panic. I almost looked at it as a gift of time. And I thought, I'm going to do all those things that I've said, if only I had some spare time, I'd do A, B, or C. So I did. And I started keeping a list of all the things that I accomplished, because I really wanted to have something to show for what I knew for most people was a really appalling time. I wanted it to be really positive. And funnily enough, it was that list which became integral to applying for these business awards, because I was able to really be very specific about the things that I had done to grow the business. And so, from, I would say, the middle of the year, right? It's the strongest Christmas that I've had, actually, in some respects, it was really quite a positive experience for me. And that the skills that I've acquired at those various points in my journey, so whether that's client management, interpersonal skills, project management, accountancy, being able to prepare my own accounts and submit VAT reports and so on. All of those have really played a role in the business that I have today. But if I ordinarily, if we'd hosted this a week ago, I would have ended on a super buoyant note. But if I'm really honest and in the spirit of sharing with you, after the mixed messages that we're getting from the government at present, we didn't have a family holiday last year, and we have got one booked in summer of this year. And I've been working 7 days a week now for well over a year, and I am exhausted. And that is my beacon of light to look forward to. And so if we're really denied having a summer holiday, that is really going to take the wind out of my sails. And Sylvia, who's got family in Italy, I know you can relate to what I'm saying. And so I guess what I will have to do is focus on the things that I can control. And I'm actually very interested to know about some of the things, Georgina and Jacqui, that you talk about developing resilience as a skill. So I think there have been times in my life where you have no option. You just have to pick yourself up and keep going. And so that's sort of my roundabout way from my life in Australia to business owner and board member of the London Diamond Bourse, and some of the challenges that I've faced and overcome along the way.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Jacqui, for talking through your story and all of those challenges, which some of them, incredible, that you've seen the positive in some of those situations and managed to come back even stronger, which is, as you say, is the definition of resilience. To everyone on the line, we'd love to have some questions. If you feel more comfortable chatting in, please feel free. If you'd like to come off mute, please do that. I have some questions in my mind, but I will let you guys jump in first. So anything popping up for anyone that you'd like to ask Jacqui? Hi, Jacqui. Oh, I think we had a couple of people jump in then. Feel free to try again.
Sylvia, I know you had your hand up. What were you going to ask?
Yeah, I didn't see you, Anita. I'm so sorry. Well, no, I was wondering, I know we don't know for sure what's going to happen, but provided things become normal again, whatever normal will mean, what are your plans in terms of when social interaction is going to be possible again? How do you envision the business changing? Because there's this bounce back. So there's a lot of new doors opening. Do you have some dreams? Because we don't know yet if they're planned. So, yeah.
Quite well, a few actually, because when I touched on the fact that jewelry is inherently personal, both in the way we buy it and also the way we respond to it, because normally most key pieces of jewelry we have are to celebrate key personal occasions, or if you inherit something from a family member. And so I've had to try and replicate that as closely as I can remotely. So I've had online consultations in the absence of being able to have them in person. And quite surprisingly, markets have opened up to me that I hadn't expected. So I've sold a couple of things to American clients. And in fact, as you know, I get a lot of traffic on my website from the US. And I'd never really thought of acting on that, whereas I know I can do it now. So there may very well be opportunities to start more proactively working on that sort of market. I had also had a lot of bookings for corporates last year to do masterclasses. And that was going to be a different revenue stream for me as well. And they all had to be cancelled. And they are still on a wait list. As soon as we can get to a point where those sorts of things can be, and because they tend to be quite intimate events, I think we can also host something like that confidently with social distancing and so on, so that people feel comfortable. And obviously we have the private viewing rooms at the Bourse. Being able to start to meet with people again is important. So I think now having that balance, so people don't have to. We know that if they don't want to come and meet me at the Bourse, no problem, we can get around it other ways. But I think actually having the confidence to move beyond just UK borders. And it's not just America, you know, I've sold things to Italy, to Denmark, and so on. So all of that was unexpected upside. And so I will continue to work on that as well. Somebody else asked something around the same time as Sylvia, but I didn't catch who it was.
Hi, it's Anita.
Hi, Anita. I gather it's very early your time.
Yes,
Welcome.
yes. So
it's lovely to see you.
Well, actually, you're not seeing me by design because I haven't put my face on yet today. So my vanity is trumping. And but anyway, first of all, I'm just actually really grateful that I got up early to listen to this wonderful story. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Jacqui, for sharing that. And it really touched me in quite a few places. A couple comments and then my question. The first comment is, it was interesting for me. I had a reflection. I went out for one of the first lunches yesterday with just a colleague, one of those nice networking kind of lunches. And I was so excited to actually put jewelry on again, right? And this lady commented on it and I recognized, you know, I wore a bracelet that I'd been given from one of my colleagues, a very special friend, Jacqui and Georgina know her. Her name's Pauline. Nice sparkly bracelet and beautiful necklace that kind of matched. And my lunch partner commented on it. And I just realized how special it is to have jewelry that means something to you, right? And I recognized, or I reflected, that all the pieces of jewelry that are my go-to pieces are ones that I have a personal attachment to. And I don't think until I heard your talk that I'd ever really given that much thought. I was subconsciously just picking those same pieces, right? And I hadn't realized that I was attaching meaning to them because of who had given them to me. So that was sort of a really kind of aha for me this morning. So thank you for that. The second thing is, I just want to acknowledge your story about standing up to the bully in your office. Like, wow, right? I was so like, you go, girl. And I know, so for so many of us, that's really hard to do, but that inspired me. Now, coming around to my question. You had mentioned that when you made the shift mentally to sort of really realizing that you had to do something different, I'm curious, you talked about employing a business coach, and I'm wondering, do you think you would have gotten to where you ended up had you not done that?
She was instrumental, actually. And again, she came on my radar completely from left field. I'd actually gone to a LinkedIn information session through a professional organization, and I was so impressed by her. And she'd done sort of coaching on the side. It wasn't really her main thing. And she'd very successfully started 2 online businesses and sold them off. She was really impressive. And I think often being willing to get some tough love, getting feedback that isn't music to your ears, but taking it in the spirit that it's intended, and also to remember, you don't have to accept all of it. That's just one other person's perspective as well. But when you start getting the same message from different people, there's usually something in that. And so I only met with her a couple of times, but also she helped me reframe how I start my perspectives on things. So, you know, because I often get approached by marketeers, and I now know very, very quickly if they're right for me or not. And often they're just little tools that I picked up from her. And I think it's really interesting when you read or you hear a lot about boards increasingly having women on it because their perspectives are different. I think actually having a female coach as well was really instrumental for me. And I think because my confidence at that stage had taken quite a hit, it was really good to have somebody giving me constructive advice. So I really had something that I could work towards. And then it just slowly all started to come together. But, you know, my graphic designer was a woman. The person that built my website was a woman. Sylvia, one of the few women who works in the sort of technology space, and certainly within SEO. And of course, as well, she has the way she handles her clients slightly different because she's a woman rather than a man. And I really appreciate having those different sorts of perspectives. And the other thing that I was so delighted to hear you talking about the way you connect with the jewelry that you've been involved in, because that is absolutely the joy of a bespoke piece of jewelry. And once you've created a piece yourself, the way you're so invested in it, it is so difficult to go back to sort of mass manufactured jewelry because it is so inherently personal and people have such lovely experiences. They keep coming back. And that's the joyful side of what I do. And if you do it properly, you need to listen to people. It's quite an intimate thing because they are telling you aspects of their personality. They're telling you what they want their jewelry to say about them. And so you have to listen very carefully about the words that they use and the way they express themselves. Because it is their language of jewelry that they're communicating to you.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up question then, May?
Go for it.
We're talking about jewelry. So this is interesting as well. So over the years, of course, I've received some nice gifts, and I don't know why, maybe other women on the call can relate to this, but I have a notoriously bad luck with losing earrings. And
everyone loses one earring.
I have one earring, and I have like lots of beautiful little pieces of jewelry, you know, earrings that I have the single, but I can't get rid of it. And so I remember one day, I don't know, a few years ago, I have this bag of all this gold and jewelry. And at some point when gold went through the roof, I thought, oh, I should take it in and get it, you know, turned in for money or melt it down. But now that I've got you on the line, or Jacqui, is there somewhere I could go to get these kind of funky pieces of earrings, one-off earrings, made into something other than an earring? Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Of course. That's what we do all the time. And I'm going to throw it back to you, actually. I'm going to mention a couple of things. So, and this will come down to your own personal jewelry style. But I actually love wearing mismatched earrings. So for example, I've got a pair of earrings. One is a kiss and the other's a hug. Or if I've got a statement pair of earrings and I've got my ears pierced a second time, I will never, ever have matching earrings in the set. It's too matchy snatchy for me. So I might have a little diamond bar in one earring and a little hoop in the other or something. So explore how you feel about actually wearing earrings that, you know, that sort of asymmetric look, to see if you're comfortable with that. But most jewelers will offer a service where you can reset either existing or inherited jewelry. And in fact, I've just finished a bracelet for a client who had been left a very old pendant that the style of it was sort of from the, well, very early 1900s. So it didn't have that lovely streamlined Art Deco look. It was before that. And there was one really beautiful diamond in it, which we've taken out of the setting and we've put into a very contemporary bracelet, and the little diamond just hangs by a very short chain.
Oh, wow.
And so it is, and the way I look at it is it's almost like the cycle of life through jewelry. So if you receive something and you're not using it and it's just sitting, gathering dust, it's such a waste. If you reimagine it, repurpose it, and you create something new, you bring it back to life again, which is what you should be doing. So yes, you absolutely, and it doesn't have to be reset as a an earring. It can be a pendant, it can be anything. So, and that's the whole thing. When you start from scratch, the world is your oyster with this. You can explore all sorts of things.
Oh, thank you for that. You've just given me an idea of how I'm going to reward myself with the next time I achieve something, is to create a beautiful piece that will speak to me from all of my bits of one earrings and broken chains and all the rest of it. So thank you so much.
Well, if you do, send me a picture. I want to see what you do with it. I'm really curious.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. I might be coming to you for help on that.
Well, I'd love to talk to you about it too.
I think
Georgina, were you going to ask me something?
I think we all want to see what comes out from that. 100%. I do have a couple of questions. Just thinking that who hasn't asked a question from the audience? Would anyone else like to? We've got about 15 minutes left.
Hello.
Oh, Amy, you're on mute.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I can.
Hello. Hi, Jacqui. Thank you very much for your story, and it was great to hear how you moved from a very terrible situation to now, which is a wonderful outcome, I would say. Actually, my question is related to the beginning, so where you were bullied by this man, and I because I it's not about myself, it's about a friend of mine who currently is not in a similar situation, but she has her boss who is sort of like that, and you know, she's struggling to come out of it and to be able to, you know, progress in her position as well. So she feels a little stuck. Is there anything that, you know, you could suggest for me to tell her to help her with this situation, given that you've come out of it? And it's really, you know, impressive that you managed to do that. I know it's 2021 and she's in a situation as such.
Well, when this happened to me, it was well over 20 years ago. It probably 22, 23 years ago, although it doesn't seem it. And really, strictly speaking, if there was a proper corporate structure involved, I should have been able to go to HR and say to somebody there, this man's behavior is unacceptable, and they knew it. You know, the fact that when they restructured, they isolated him and stopped staff reporting. The fact that I had a stream of women coming into me in the bathroom when I was upset saying, he has a history, he has form with this. They all knew, and they chose not to do anything about it. And I guess with the benefit of hindsight, I'm surprised it took me as long as it did to say something, because I'm not really that backward in coming forward. If I will call people out for inappropriate behavior and so on, but not everybody is wired that way. And nor should they have to be. There should be processes in place to protect them. And so I guess I would suggest that she goes to, if it's a big enough organization where they have a proper HR department and so on, that's where she should probably start. And they're the people that should be tasked with. I don't know, Jacqui and Georgina.
I was going to ask you about the same event, actually. I don't know, are you still there? Because you've frozen on my screen. Yeah,
Jacqui, you'd frozen, but I think I caught the end of that.
Oh, there she is. Yeah. I was going to ask you about the same thing and actually ask you, did you actually say anything? And you've answered that, and you said you sort of spoke up directly, and I totally applaud you for doing that. And it isn't easy, but something Georgina and I talk a lot about is this sort of systemic virtual abuse of women in organizations. That how do we encourage young women now to stand up and be seen in these situations? Because I worked in an investment bank, and the cultures are really quite toxic, and I think they remain quite toxic. And it does take a lot of courage for a lot of women to not go and talk about it in the toilet, but have the conversation with the business. Not, you know, there's HR, but HR are often scared of the business. So, you know, the power and this power over that exists within these financial services organizations, well, every organization, but I think it's particularly big there. It is, how do we encourage women to actually step up and say, this isn't okay and we need to do something about it? And it doesn't seem to be happening in those organizations. It seems to be happening in, you know, the world at large. But we've all got our own personal stories of those sort of things happening to us. And I think it's, women need to really shout about this when it isn't okay. So you answered the question, but it was just a comment on what was said. I'd love to know what's on your list as well, the list that you got done. If you're still there, you're frozen on my screen.
Sorry, I'm still frozen.
You're not now, you're moving.
Okay. Do you mean the list that he presented me with?
No, sorry, I'm asking you two different things. The first one was, I was really commenting that I was going to ask you, you know, did you actually make a complaint to anyone? But you've answered that. You didn't.
I dealt with it myself.
Yeah. And I think that's common. A lot of successful, resilient women, we do tend to say, well, I just get on with it, I deal with it. And it took me a while to actually learn that that's not okay, because not everyone can. It's sort of, how do we give people the psychological safety to feel like it is okay to be as strong as you were? Because you did it personally. You said, this is not okay, it's 10 o'clock at night, you're not organized, that's not my problem, which is great that you have that strength. But we also need to look at the sort of power over structures that are going on in organizations. So it was just a comment, really. But
it's also interesting that you know, I was pushed to the point where it was almost like a make or break situation. And also the way he had humiliated me when I was leaving, he sort of brought it upon himself, because I think you get to a certain point where you just thought, I am not going to tolerate this anymore. And I think, had I allowed him to do that, it would have just been curtains for me. I was basically drawing a line. And it's really interesting that they talk about this whole thing with bullies, about standing up to them, because there was a very noticeable difference. So when he tried to do the same thing the following night, when I said he didn't have the same conviction, he didn't, because he really was very unsure then, because I'd created this sort of doubt in his mind how I was going to respond. And that emboldened me to just say no again. And I knew that was it. I'd sort of beaten him by that stage. But, you know, the company really should have been dealing with him
absolutely
in a responsible way, because this wasn't isolated. So Amy, I hope she's able to get some sort of support. And of course, and I don't know whether with everybody acting remotely, whether it's better or worse for him as well, because obviously people are having to work in very different ways at present as well.
And I think that's what's coming up for me is that, as you're all having that conversation as well, is it still feels like it's such a risk, and it's such a risk to talk, to stand up for yourself as you did, Jacqui, and it worked out, you know, well in the long term, which is brilliant. I myself and know other people that have stood up in the face of that kind of either something that's been said or something with the processes that doesn't seem right and seems unequal, and the result has been too bad, you know, like it or lump it. And I've taken the decision to leave companies where that's been the case, and that's a risk on me, because then, you know, you lose salary and everything else. So I think it's still such a challenge. Even going to HR, you know, you get labeled as the troublemaker. It doesn't always have the result that you want it to. And I think what Anita's put in the chat, I think is coming up for me as well. And Anita, I'll just read out your chat. I think it really also comes back to leadership. So many leaders are acting inappropriately from either lack of skill or lack of will. Both need to be addressed by the organisation, and leaders, in my view, should be monitored and evaluated in their role as leaders, all in caps. And I totally agree, because I think too much we're thinking of what we can do as women standing up for ourselves and in the face of it, and it is such a risk that we need to be thinking, you said in your story, Jacqui, that so many other senior women had left roles because of him, and it's like, oh, it's such a shame that person is still in that role, and thank goodness after you he was moved on, but how many other people had their career changed beforehand? It's just, we need to think about how the systems are operating and how we can start to break down some of these barriers more generally.
I have a kind of comment question for Jacqui, and then anyone else who wants to kind of pipe in with an experience. Can you guys hear me? Oh, you must do.
Yeah, we can.
So like, am I talking to myself? Thank you. Yeah, so I had an experience recently. So I worked just with myself. So it's kind of a me, myself, and I situation. So have you guys had an experience where someone from outside your organization kind of comes into you and kind of critiques you without invitation, which I'm fine with, but then it carries on and on and on? When you kind of say, okay, thanks for the comments, thank you, and they're just there like, what do you do in that situation? Because it's someone else from a different organization. I kind of feel like I can't stand up for myself or have any control now of how they perceive me. So what are you meant to do to kind of pick yourself up from that situation where you feel like you didn't really have any control over? And it's kind of, I don't know, like being just patronized massively. That's what I'm currently like. Yeah, that's how I feel right now.
Is this person a client or somebody who wants to work with you, or a friend? Who is it?
No, it's someone from another professional organisation that I really respect and had a good relationship with before. And I guess they do a similar thing to me. They're also educators. And they just had kind of a critique of how I used a term, and then just carried on again and again. I didn't disagree with them. In fact, I actually changed the terms that I was using on my website, but they just didn't stop. And then they shut it down and said, it's no point going back and forth, and kind of just left it. And I felt like I got put in a washing machine, and you're just like, what on earth just happened to me? Like, I don't know what I did. But now I suddenly feel like maybe there's a burnt bridge, and I don't feel like I did anything wrong. And I never apologized for using the wrong term, because it's not completely incorrect. It's more of an opinion for if it's correct or not. And I just felt completely like, well, I don't know what I've done, but I feel now a bit stupid when I don't feel like I should feel stupid. So it's just like
I've had an identical experience, Julia. I suspect it's from somebody from the same organisation, quite possibly about the same thing. So I will have a conversation with you outside of this. I also think I'll give you another saying that I'm a big believer in. A joy shared is a joy doubled. A sorrow shared is a sorrow halved. And I think it's really difficult when you're working by yourself, and I do work like you, whilst I go into the bourse to meet with clients a lot, actually most of what I do is at home and quite solitary. And so lockdown for me has actually been quite lovely, because my husband's working from home, my kids are back, and so I actually have company. And I think when you're also now at home being denied social contact, just being able to talk to somebody about having had this awful experience, it lightens your load a bit. And I think that actually, just because of the circumstances that we're in at present, it makes it really difficult. And also, who is this person to be holding themselves out to be an expert? You are fantastic at what you do. And you're an absolute joy. I know, because I've been in your sessions. You are great. And there are very few people out there with the sort of credentials that you have. And And so I'm very sorry to hear that you've had this. And sometimes these people, they just leave this indelible mark. And I'm not sure that anything that I'm going to be able to say will actually comfort you much. But almost being able to move on from it. I mean, Jacqui, I don't know what your views are. You're the expert on this sort of stuff. But I've had very similar experiences, and it's quite wounding, actually.
Well, we work a lot with how people respond to these sort of situations. That's part of what we do in our program. But basically, you're experiencing what you experienced is that your brain experienced a threat response, and there's basic human needs that we all have that either create psychological safety or take it away. And in some way, your brain registered a threat response. And what that does is it shuts down your sort of logical reasoning, and it lets your emotional brain take over. So, you know, the fact that you're re-experiencing some emotion, and thank you so much for sharing, because that's incredibly authentic and powerful of you. It says much, much more about the other person. And they clearly, you know, people do things online and virtually that they would never do face to face if in person. And, you know, it sounds quite spiteful, to be honest, but we could run a little process with you, you know, and show you what you can do about it, which will calm your limbic system. And just going, oh, it's that, actually does make you feel a lot better in the moment. So, you know, if we'd be happy to have a phone call with you sometime and help you with that if it's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's
actually, can I mention one? Sorry, Julia. I had a not dissimilar thing happen with somebody who's a big player in the jewelry industry. And it was one of the saddest commissions I've ever had to do. And I've never really talked about it before. But we were producing a ring for a boy who was terminally ill, and it was for his mother. And to meet the price point, rather than it being a bespoke piece, I was getting a customized, ready-to-wear ring from a supplier. And they produced it in the wrong size. It was too big. And so when I sent it back and asked them to resize it, they did. And then they charged me a fortune for doing it. And when I queried it, because I really wasn't making any money on it in any case because of the circumstances of the commission, this man, I cannot tell you how aggressive he was. I didn't sleep for about 3 nights. And Julia, it's exactly the same. And I did feel very threatened by him. So Jacqui, I would definitely appreciate having a better understanding about how we respond in situations like that so that I can combat that sort of thing better.
Okay. I'm sure we can.
Because I don't think it's unusual. I think, no, but I do think, and it is almost always men that cause this threatening response as well. I don't think I've been in a situation where a woman has made me feel like that.
I think that we all react to different things, and different things trigger us. And depending on what's happened to you in the past, your patterns will mean that if you've had lots of experiences where men have been very aggressive, yes, they are known to be more so, but it could be that you had loads of patterns with your mother and your friends and people at school. You know, we all come with a different set of luggage, and we get triggered because we think things mean something about us that they don't. You know, our program is all about this. This is, you know, we talk about existential fears, not being important, not being good enough, being unloved or out of control, and the neuroscience around what triggers you and what to do about it. It's 4 sessions, and that's what it's all about, basically. But we'd be happy to run you through the process. It'd probably take half an hour or so on the phone to give you an idea of what that's like.
Yeah, no, that would be really good, because I think learning how you do function does really help.
Yeah,
it helps to kind of make it
prepared time.
It helps to to label it and to add some, you know, to kind of go more put some more rationality into it. And as you know, Jacqui's already said for you, Julia, you're amazing. You know what you do is amazing. So our brains just don't hear positive information as much as they hear negative information. They're much more likely to dwell on that negative. So, you know, understanding how your brain works and how you can label, and, you know, then to start taking in some of that positive information instead, sounds like it would be really helpful. And just to call out Anita's, I think it's Anita's chat, women can be bullies as well. So yeah, I think yeah, that's absolutely true. I think you know what Jacqui was alluding to there, what Jacqui Leland Graham was referring to with Jacqui Larsson. You know, I think that it depends what your trigger is, and it sounds like one of your triggers, Jacqui, might be, you know, feeling important, and when your boss was talking to you in that way, it felt like a really, you know, it felt threatening because he was talking down to you and it was patronizing, and, you know, doing it at the end of the day, and him being unorganized, all of that stuff. You know, so perhaps it's been more men that have triggered you in that way, whereas women might have triggered you in a different way, and it's not been as salient. So yeah, it would be really interesting to dig into. If anyone on the call, I know we're about 5 minutes over now, if anyone on the call wants to speak to us more about how you can build your personal resilience, so you can find out your own triggers, we'd love to see you all on the course. Otherwise we could set up some calls and do one-on-one and talk you through that process as well. Any final questions? I appreciate everyone staying on for a bit longer. It's been a great conversation. Anita just said, great call. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Jacqui and Julina, for organising this. Absolutely our pleasure.
Thanks for getting up at 6:30.
Any final questions? No, looks like everyone's good. Well, finally then, just thank you so much to Jacqui Larsson. Thank you for taking us through all of your journey. I think something that I'm taking away is definitely seeing opportunity. I think you've mentioned so many different points in there about how you were in a good situation and things got even better, about how you're in slightly different, you know, difficult situation and things got better. So I think that's my takeaway, is when a door closes, a window opens, and that's definitely something to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this year. Whoever knows what will bring. So thank you all, everyone else, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the future. This session will be sent out, so you can revisit if you want to. But thank you for joining us live on the line, and take care. Have a great rest of your day.